just how poor is Russia's planning for its attacks and offensives? Well, leaked audio gives us an insight into just how poorly these soldiers are treated and just how little it takes for the Russians to decide they're ready to attack. Let's get into it. As always, guys, it's Insight from Ukraine and Russia. Give this dude's channel a sub. It's an awesome channel. And more importantly, he's a good dude who seems to be definitely hooks us up with all sorts of awesome intercepted videos, not just the ones I listen to. There's probably dozens on there, and they are really fascinating insight into the world inside the Russian military, something, again, that historically has been really hard to see. Given the level of propaganda and information control, historically, it was rare to see, for example, the inside of a Soviet unit in the Soviet-Afghan War or in the Second World War, and now we can listen to their private phone calls.
Forces are exhausted with infinite attempts to break through Ukrainian defense lines in different parts of the front, because now they use pointless mini-storming groups with no equipment just to make it look like they still on a huge offensive. You'll hear about it in this intercepted phone call that was called before New Year.
Okay, so I want to point something out. It's fairly important, is that this is indeed, Russia has thrown a tremendous number of troops at the Ukrainian lines, a frightening volume of attacks. But one of the things that has happened subsequently is that these vast number of attacks have managed to indeed make gains. And we're going to talk a little bit about why I think that is. But Russian forces have been advancing near Bakhmutsky, Soledar, and other areas to the north of Bakhmut. Why? Well, let's listen to this and I'll break it down for you guys. One of the reasons that Russia is struggling to equip its military is that interest rates on its debt have climbed thanks to the war. In 2020, Russia could get loans at 6%, but now it's lucky if it can finance at 10%. More money goes towards interest and less remains to field troops. Our own finances aren't so different. If you have high interest debt like credit cards, personal loans, and medical bills, today's sponsor, PDS Debt, may be able to help. If you are making payments every month but your principal balance isn't going down, PDS Debt can help. PDS Debt rolls your payments into a single, low, 0% interest monthly payment. Everyone with $10,000 in debt qualifies, and there's no minimum credit score. Fair and even bad credit are accepted. Consolidating your loans can save you thousands in interest and fees and allow you to pay off your debt in a fraction of the time. PDS Debt is offering a free debt analysis. Just click the link in the description or go to pdsdebt.com/combat. That's pdsdebt.com/combat to take their free debt assessment and see just how much you could be saving. Just click the link, select Combat Veteran Reacts from the drop-down menu, select what type of debt you have, the total amount, the delinquency, and enter your info to receive free debt analysis and see how much you could be saving with PDS Debt.
Хорошего назад отправляют. Я говорю, тебе куда назад, нахуй? Тебе только зашили неделю назад, ногу эту дырку. В общем так. А так тишина. Слухи идут, и причем с разных источников, что полная мобилизация будет.
We've discussed this. It sounds like, again, they understand that Putin is beginning to create the pretext for a full mobilization. The Russian information space has started to pivot. We are seeing that Putin has actually created his own fictional soldiers, widows, and wives and mothers group. And that group, who no one's ever heard of before this week, has asked Putin not to stop the war, as you would expect from a mother who's lost her son, but instead to escalate it, asking Putin to kill, I'm going to get demonetized, asking Putin to send more soldiers to the front, more Russian men to the front with this minimal training. So it sounds like, again, the Russians understand how the game is played, certainly better than any of us, and they understand that, yep, the full mobilization is coming.
Вот такая хуйня. То ли перед Новым годом, то ли после сразу. И типа, будем наступать, там что-то такое вот. Короче, ждем наступления оттуда и сами будем наступать. Вот все, что слышно.
This is interesting because this is exactly what happened. You saw Ukrainians push in near Crimea, and the offensive there was supposed to be a hard strike that broke through Russian lines, was my guess. I don't have any special insider intel. In fact, we can show you what was supposed to happen, and then we'll talk about what, well, it did happen. So the Ukrainian forces had seemed to be amassing a number of tanks and other infantry, but especially their mechanized forces, really, near this town of Savote. They pushed to the north here, near Novoselivsk, Kuzamivka, Kirovoshivka, and they were going to try to break through Russian lines, take advantage of the fact that there are these wide open fields here that's easy for tanks and armored vehicles to really cross and cover a lot of distance quickly. It's a good place to launch a mechanized offensive operation. The problem is that the weather didn't cooperate, is what the rumor is, and that instead of waiting until the ground was frozen solid, a high amount of mud and water slowed the offensive. It meant that when they would break through lines, they wouldn't make the tremendous progress they needed to. And the Russian forces, while they're not as mechanized now, they did have time. Once they realized the Ukrainians were attacking here, they pivoted and relocated reinforcements to reinforce these lines, meaning that instead of being able to break through the Russian lines and really create chaos in the backfield the way they had in Kharkiv, instead the offensive got stalled out and eventually resulted in fairly minimal gains. And a few weeks later, what do we start to see? But we actually see Russia start to make gains north of Bakhmut. You can see here we're working backwards on the map. And as you guys can see, here's the 31st, right? First, by the 5th, you see Russia is really starting to swoop in and seize places like Yakovlivka, Bakhmutsky, and is pressuring Soledar, all of which are a ways north of Bakhmut, but still key on the road to Bakhmut. I say all this so you guys understand that this is basically exactly what ended up happening. The Ukrainian offensive was stopped, and then Russia took that as its cue to push near Soledar.
Здесь тоже этот генералы, которые ходят, типа давайте сначала окопаетесь, а потом в атаку пойдем.
Ты такой умный. Ну сам пускай идет в атаку.
Да.
Ой, блин. Ну слух был, что должны были сменить эти резервы, которые стоят наши. Ну, походу...
Ты видишь, сегодня вот одна готова, 30 человек.
This is also crazy. I don't know where Astrakhan is, but I imagine what was supposed to be their relief, an entire company, usually 200 people or so, ended up being 30. That's a small platoon.
А остальные, короче, бухают, их там местные потравили, заебли на всех.
Yeah, this is also a problem. And I've talked about this in other videos. Many commanders and many soldiers would actually say that they don't want newly mobilized conscripts in their units. The U.S. had a similar problem in the Vietnam War, where many of the drafted soldiers would be unmotivated, undisciplined, and would arrive sometimes with considerable problems, substance use disorders, untreated mental illness. And the result would be that they would be not just not contribute to the fight, but that they would actually hinder the unit's ability to do its job. And this is what the Russians are seeing here. At the end of the day, if you don't think someone can stay sober, then what makes you think that you're going to want them to be the other person pulling watch in your dugout, right? Why would you trust them to look to the sky and watch out for drones if you don't think they can be sober for any length of time? Or if they're going through withdrawal. Alcohol withdrawal is an MFer, and it will definitely impede your ability to do even a basic job, let alone a high intensity job like being a combat soldier.
Да и нам надо было так же забивать, как они изначально.
Да вот именно, блин.
Мы себя проявили, показали то, что воины света. И первый генерал, когда пришел, он вообще охуел, что здесь мобики стоят.
О, а
Где
что
вы-
думали, там контрактники?
Где, говорит, у вас позиции спецназа, ебать? Они вот. Где мы стоим, здесь спецназ должен быть. Он так смотрит на Валеру, говорит, а ты контрактник? Нет. На второго, ты контрактник? Нет. Ашхабад стоит наш и говорит, они все, говорит, мобики. И он охуел. Здесь должно такая хуйня.
Oh man. Yeah, this is the problem, is that oftentimes you're seeing now where what sometimes is referred to as a death spiral. This is when a military unit, let's say a Spetsnaz unit, takes 50% casualties in the first 2 months of the Ukraine conflict. And then let's say it takes another 50% of casualties in the second 2 months. That means that in 4 months, that unit has continually been replaced, but it's not been replaced by fully trained Spetsnaz soldiers. It's been replaced by soldiers trained a little more hastily with a little bit more improvised equipment. The next time that happens, and it happens faster, right? In the next 2 months, let's say there's 70% casualties. Why? Inferior training, inferior equipment. Now, the people that replace those replacements, they have even worse training and even worse equipment, and they last an even shorter period of time on the battlefield. And so the end state is that you have comically badly trained soldiers in headquarters that are ostensibly special forces, and maybe even were at one time earlier in the war top tier units.
Стоять, это урод, ебать. И фотоловушки, ебать, и ПВО, и вся хуйня у нас должна быть. А у нас ни кроме лопаты ничего нету, ебать.
Ебануться, блядь. Вот это пи***ц. Ни снайперов, нахуй, ни хуя ничего, да? Снайперов тоже нету, как обычно же.
Получается, мы самые первые стоим ближе к хохлам.
Ну, 7-я рота, да, вся?
Нет, именно наш взвод валовский. А
10
малыш от
человек,
нас
да,
где-то...
Like we said, the companies are 30 soldiers, a platoon is 8. This is a NATO squad.
Нас 8.
8 даже. И всем похуй, да?
Да.
Пи***цы. Знаешь, что надо сделать? На часы просто и прям хуй забить его. Гдыря.
This is the worst advice I've maybe ever heard a soldier give. Listen, if you don't trust the people to your left and right, you have a severe problem. But what you need to do in that situation is find the people who are competent, who are capable. And unfortunate as it may be, you have to rely on them twice as much. And it sucks. In the military, when it happens at scale, we joke, we call it the more work award. And it's the price of being a competent soldier who gets things done and thinks ahead. And it means that you're relied on much more than the average soldier. But again, I'm taking this from the perspective of when soldiers lack maturity, they may not have the competence or forward thinking to understand 2 or 3 steps ahead through a problem. Think, for example, you can tell some soldiers, hey, I need you to get all the weapons for your squad serviced. And so that person will have to, a good soldier will think 3 steps back, and they'll say, okay, to do that, I need to get the serial numbers. I need to check with the squad leader. I need to get a slot with the armorer, and I need to get an update every so often to make sure that if there's issues with the weapons, I at least know where they have to go. That's the sort of 3 or 4 steps back thinking that good soldiers can have, and many don't. Many just will get that assignment and they'll need it broken down into those small steps for them. What we don't have is stuff like this, where soldiers are so intoxicated they are unable to contribute to the mission. But becoming one of those soldiers is the most toxic possible solution.
Реально издевательство уже полное.
Мы не будем эту позицию удерживать.
Ну, понятно. А каким ее удерживать? Кто ее будет удерживать? 8 человек? Вот это прям подстава. Хотя бы что там, усилить ее как-то чем-то, кем-то, хотя бы...
Народа нету.
Подожди, ну, с батальона сколько народу сейчас? 3 роты также?
У нас здесь где-то человек 50.
That's wild. That's also like a platoon. 8 people can hold a position if it's an appropriate size and scale mission. And but here's the thing to remember. Let's say, for example, that you're running defensive operations. You want to have, let's say you're running one fighting position. Okay, what do you need in one fighting position? You need to have 2 12-hour shifts. That's pushing your soldiers pretty hard. One person is up, one person is sleeping, eating, cleaning themselves, and performing other essential tasks. Now, you also have more problems though, because one person is occupied, the other person is again sleeping, cleaning, eating, etc. You also have a bunch of other problems you have to solve. First off, you need to have someone else who can leave the position and go behind the lines to get things like supplies, to communicate with command, to do other things of that nature. And you don't need one per position, but if you want to occupy 2 or more positions, you need someone on that sort of runner duty. And remember, casualties happen, and one person cannot really evacuate another person. So if you want to hold a position, you need to at least maintain people in that position, but then you also have to have someone in the rear area to remove a casualty and who can be brought up and assigned to occupy that fighting position so that the healthy soldier doesn't have to make a choice between staying in their position and getting their buddy to medical treatment. Because remember, 2 soldiers, one's wounded, the other one's going to have to carry them out of there, meaning the position would be abandoned. So you see how quickly you can run into a situation where a 2-person position can actually become demand 4 people to operate it. So when you have 50 people, that's a really small number of positions you can occupy. Especially because people also get sick, they get wounded, they come off the line for all sorts of reasons, and you more and more get allocated to those sort of, I say support roles, but literally the support role can be as little as ferrying food and ammo from a central location to these actual foxholes.
Есть.
Атаки 400.
Да?
Это
Какие штурмы?
Да, и знаешь, что самое интересное? Генерал говорит, они увидят то, что мы в атаку пойдем, бегут. Ну да. Ага.
Братан, даже не вздумайте на штурм идти. На
Нет, нет. 113-ю отдали.
Отдали?
Да, и 112-ю.
Ебать. Что ж там за стоят-то?
Ахмат был. Знаешь, как получилось? Как мы пришли просто на 113-ю и заселились, там никого не было.
No. This is funny. So he's saying that the Ukrainians, the 113th, was spread so thin in the sector that they were supposed to occupy that the Ukrainians just moved forward and established positions inside the 113th sector. That is bananas, if I'm understanding this translation correctly. And then the 112th realized that their positions, their flank was occupied not by an allied unit, but by Ukrainians, and that they were about to get annihilated and probably withdrew. That's my guess what they're describing here.
А со 112 сами убежали, видимо.
Нет, так же вроде никого не было.
Говорили, что тоже слушок сегодня-вчера, что типа по телеку на самом деле там наши тоже отступили назад. Ну, где-то по фронту, блядь. Ну, пожалуйста, наши позиции отдали. Ебаный в рот, блядь.
Да, мы кровь проливали.
Many Russian soldiers do realize that they've been used just as cannon fodder, but unfortunately they don't do anything about it, just like the Russian soldier you'll hear in this next interception.
И ничего тут неизвестно, не говорят, отпустят, не отпустят.
Нет, не отпустят. Нас просто пушечное мясо готовится, вот все.
У меня больше терпения никакого не хватает.
У них, у контрактников, у всех телефоны, у всех интернет, у них карта. А они где хохлы находятся на карте.
Yeah, they probably look at the same maps that I do. I mean, guys, this is crazy also that, you know, I strongly doubt the internet maps are significantly better than the Russian issued maps. So a lot of the rumors are that their individual fighting soldiers still have Soviet issue maps or tourist maps. That's pretty common. So the idea that they probably are pulling up the same maps I look at, and they use them to figure out where the Ukrainian positions likely are.
А у вас вообще, вас действительно бросили?
Бросили, да.
Что будет, то будет. Так по старше некому, что ли, вот обратиться-то?
Да у нас здесь нет их, они вообще не знают, где здесь полковник. Командир полка, мы не знаем, где они вообще, мы их ни разу не видели.
Как мол связаться-то? Вот.
Okay, a regimental commander, I too have never, I don't think I saw once my brigade commander. And I have no idea, I don't think there really was a regimental commander at that time. I think a brigade commander would have answered to probably the theater command in Afghanistan. This is not uncommon. The difference is that in the Russian military, there is less of a command structure all the way down. There's just an expectation that junior officers sort of manage large numbers of troops directly. Whereas, for example, as a platoon leader, I and my platoon sergeant coordinated and worked together to manage 3 squad leaders, who in turn managed 3 team leaders, who in turn managed a team of 2 soldiers and themselves. This is, of course, a very, very leadership intensive way of doing things, but it allows really complex military operations to go off really well. For example, I could sit there and other than occasional status updates when I needed them, I didn't really concern myself with the maintenance of my vehicles unless it became an operational issue. But the routine maintenance, that was on the team leader and his team and their team. I was a military police. We had men and women at all ranks. And that was on their team. And they would be expected to say, hey, there's a weird rattle. The shifter is catching. The AC isn't blowing hot, and would take it to the mechanic themselves, have the mechanic take a look at it, figure out what was wrong. The mechanics would order the parts themselves. And if the vehicle was down for any length of time, that's when they would go to their squad leader and say, hey, listen, vehicle Romeo 131 is going to be down. The AC is out. And he would tell me, and then I would coordinate with other units to get a replacement vehicle. But the advantage of that system is that you had soldiers who were, again, 2 19-year-olds and a 21-year-old. But because of the way they were supervised and because of the culture of leadership, I didn't have to worry about repairing every single brake pad on the vehicle myself. Russia doesn't appear to do that. It appears that lieutenants, captains, commanders, these guys have extreme levels of control and of their unit. Nothing is pushed down. And that's why you see these sort of insane outcomes where soldiers are sitting there literally abandoned in positions simply because if you're one officer with 50 soldiers under your command and no subordinate leadership, you can only deal with one soldier, one issue at a time. You have a human brain and it can only focus on one task at a time. So it means that all these other tasks like figuring out something productive for your soldiers to do just never become a factor.
С командиром полка бы вот связаться вам.
Они далеко в деревне бухают, где они еще-то. Что они там делают-то?
Это действительно этих взять за грудки всем. Ты же там не один, вас не 5, не 10 человек.
Damn, even mom is like, you should stage a mutiny.
Всем пофигу, все забухали, у нас все пьют, всем пофигу вообще.
Да. А воевать
All right, mom is asking the questions we all should be.
Надо были спирту, вот спирт бодяжут.
Ой.
Mom's like, oh, I understand. You haven't answered my question over who's doing the fighting.
А самое главное, это мы в Белгороде, видишь, какая фигня.
Да.
Пацанов 100 груз 200 увозят домой-то, они, типа, в России их там это, ну, типа там. Ставят смерть, потому что погиб в Белгороде, а не на Украине.
This is some wild stuff, honestly. it's not uncommon for political reasons, internal and external, for soldiers to die somewhere else. The U.S. kind of did that sometimes in the Vietnam War when soldiers and airmen would be killed in Laos and Cambodia, countries where the U.S. was not at war and not officially engaging in military operations. Sometimes when they would take casualties, I suspect that they would have them actually be killed on the Vietnam-Cambodian border, on the Vietnamese side, always on the Vietnamese side. So that's not impossible. But what's just insane and not really answered is his mom's question of why are you all drunk all of the time? That's the only question I'm stuck with. Is like, what does it must be not fully correct, right? Because the Russians are maintaining their positions. They are at times making significant tactical gains, but it's not clear on why you would not want to become a competent fighting force. I think there's some sort of weird cultural thing where, like in the US, it's more normal to have individual units. Even if you're in a bad unit, it's more normal to sit there and go, well, I don't give a shit about the bad unit above us. We are going to do our best. We're going to circle the wagons, and we are going to be a good unit. Whether it's us will be the best 3-person team in this garbage squad, or the best squad in this garbage platoon, or the best platoon in this garbage company. That sense, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's something that isn't inherently American. Maybe it's just what happens when you have leadership. When you have a team leader who looks at his 2 soldiers and goes, no, I don't care that everyone else is drunk. You're my soldiers. You're my responsibility. It's like, it's like having kids, I guess, when the kids are out there and they're like, everybody else's parents lets them make TikToks. It's normal for parents to go, no, you're my kids. You're not making stupid TikToks. It's not that different from being a soldier, being a leader.
Какая система?
Вот я говорю, Игорь, вот жду, да не дождусь, наверное, тебя. Это вот какое сердце надо.
Oh, damn.
Don't forget to smash the like button and write a comment below this video to help me out on YouTube. Thank you for this and for your support. I'll see you next time, hopefully, and goodbye to you all. Finally, Russian forces exhausted.
No, okay, there we go. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining me. That was wild. That was something else. So, yeah, I don't even know how to respond to that. That's all I got. Thanks so much to my Lieutenant tier patrons, as always, guys. If you want access to uncensored combat video breakdowns, that is in the description. I'll catch you guys later.